Hello my Whoop friends. In this video I show you what is possibly the cheapest high-performance one-cell HD tiny Whoop with an HD video transmission system, the Meteor 75 Pro O4 PNP. I equipped my Meteor 75 Pro O4 PNP with the Caddx Ascent HD video transmitter and camera because I still had a Caddx Ascent unit from my no longer flyable Caddx Protos, as well as a newbie drone Goober V2 canopy. The installation was very easy. It really was plug and play. This Whoop combo flies very well, as you can see later in the video. I also made a few small modifications, such as applying contact enhancer to the motor plugs. I will come back to that later. I also did a static thrust test with a comparison between the Meteor 75 Pro Analog and the Meteor 75 Pro HD, as well as a hover flight time comparison and various flights, including a punch-out. The Meteor 75 Pro O4 from Betafpv is actually designed for the DJI O4 Air unit. However, it is also possible to buy this Whoop without the DJI O4 Air unit from Betafpv for about $80 in the PNP version, which means plug and play. You can then equip this base, for example, with the affordable Ascent HD video system from Caddx, which costs only $36. If you buy the Meteor 75 Pro O4 PNP for $80, the Caddx Ascent kit consisting of VTX, camera, and goggles for $185, a Betafpv Lite 4 transmitter for $50, 8 Lava 2 680 mAh Lipo flight batteries for 2 times $25, a G4C Who charger for $36, and a newbie drone Goober canopy for $5 to $6. You end up at about $410. The same beginner kit with the DJI O4 unit would cost between $720 and $940, depending on which goggles you choose. As you can see, getting started with this new Caddx Ascent HD video system is significantly cheaper. Repair costs after a crash are also much lower. A DJI O4 Air unit costs $120, while a Caddx Ascent VTX unit costs only $35. With DJI, you definitely get much better image quality and a massively better range, but the price is correspondingly high. I still recommend the DJI system to anyone who has enough money. And by having enough money, I also mean taking into account ongoing operating costs, meaning the cost of multiple Air units per year. For everyone else, the Caddx Ascent HD video system is a good alternative in the short range between 50 and 100 meters. At the time of creating this video, however, Betafpv has also released a budget HD video system with the Betafpv P1 Air unit for $38 and the VRO4 HD FPV goggles for $150, which is supposed to have a greater range than the Caddx Ascent video system. With these two options, getting into HD FPV flying with one-cell tiny Whoops has now become significantly cheaper, much to the delight of many beginners who want to train a lot and occasionally destroy a camera in a crash. Thanks to the new one-cell Lava 2 680 mAh Lipos from Betafpv, flight time is also in a very good range, with up to 7 minutes and 30 seconds. At the moment, I would probably choose the HD system from Betafpv because the Caddx Ascent HD video system is not yet fully mature, and for example, after a light bump into an obstacle, the image sometimes disappears for about 1.5 seconds. That is somewhat annoying. DJI is overall about twice as expensive, but also more than twice as good. From this point of view, DJI definitely has the best price to performance ratio, at least compared to the Caddx Ascent video system. If you want a ready-to-fly Whoop to start with, you can also buy a Caddx Protos FPV beginner kit as a first step, and then later turn it into a Meteor 75 Pro HD, or a Betafpv Aquila 20 HD FPV kit. Then you already have a transmitter, goggles, and VTX. A few words about the sponsors of this video. Betafpv, Stabilant 22 Contact Enhancer, Deox IT Contact Enhancer, and NPS Encore Contact Enhancer are the sponsors of this video. This video would not be possible without these sponsors, but this video would also not be possible without your support. Thank you very much for your support on Ko-Fi.com and through the affiliate links in the video description, as well as for your likes and comments that motivate me to keep going. Thank you, my Whoop friends. Unboxing. In this chapter, I briefly show you what to expect when you buy a Meteor 75 Pro O4 in the PNP version from Betafpv. There isn't much to say about it. It's the usual contents, the product itself, and a few spare parts. The included canopy and the camera mount are designed exclusively for the DJI O4 Air unit, The DJI-04 air unit itself is not included in the PNP version. With this version, you have to buy and install your own HD video transmission system as well as the matching canopy. In this case, I decided on the Caddx Ascent HD video system, which I removed from my defective Caddx Protos. In the future, however, I would probably rather choose the new P1 air unit from Betafpv, which also only costs $38 and seems to have more range. I will also show a few flights with a Meteor 75 Pro O4 with DJI O4 air unit on this YouTube channel, thanks to a Whoop friend who lent me his Whoop and the DJI goggles for this purpose. I will probably not buy the DJI system myself in the near future because it is too expensive for me. Modifications and weight. The most important modification I made to this tiny Whoop, which influenced the results of the flight tests, was applying contact enhancer to the motor connectors. Unfortunately, I can't reveal more yet, my Whoop friends, because I may be developing a product for you. For now, I can only say this much. The flight tests were definitely influenced by the contact enhancer. I can't say how much yet, but it's more than some people think. I personally already know. I tested it extensively with multiple tests. A video about this will come within the next half year. Stay tuned, my Whoop friends. I hope I can soon offer you a solution for the problem with the motor connectors and for more power. The second and third modification are removing the rubber from the BT 2.0 connector and applying some E6000 or E7000 glue to save a bit of weight, as well as the obligatory securing of the motor wires to the duct struts with dental floss. These are the only modifications so far. The weight of the Whoop is exactly 35 grams with this setup. In the future, I will also replace the steel motor screws with titanium screws and possibly also replace the screws that secure the canopy and the flight controller to the frame with titanium screws. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Thrust test. There was a small surprise in the thrust test. This Whoop has a secret, my Whoop friends. For me personally, however, it was not a surprise, but rather a confirmation of my feeling after the test flights and of what I had seen online from other pilots. I quickly noticed already during the first flights that the Betafpv 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop has a better thrust-to-weight ratio than the Betafpv 75 Pro analog. But I couldn't explain why, and I still can't, because the motors are exactly the same. Same size and same kV. The only thing I can do is show you the difference, which is very clear. The Betafpv 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop delivers almost 20% more static thrust, 19.3% more to be exact. That is a very noticeable difference that you can clearly hear and feel. The thrust-to-weight ratio with the Lava 2 one-cell 680 mAh Lipo is around 4.7 to 1 for the Betafpv 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop, with a takeoff weight of 51 grams and a static thrust of 241 grams, and around 4.2 to 1 for the Betafpv 75 Pro analog, with a takeoff weight of 48 grams and a thrust of 202 grams. The test setup was as follows. The kitchen scale used to measure static thrust has an accuracy of 1 gram. I performed the test on both Whoops on the same day, indoors, at the same temperature of 22 degrees Celsius. And with exactly the same Lava 2 one-cell 680 mAh Lipo, which I charged freshly to 4.35 volts directly before each test, using the exact same charging port of the charger. On both Whoops, I applied exactly the same contact enhancer to the motor connectors and pins. This is a modification that influenced the results of the flight tests. However, it affected both test Whoops equally, since I applied the contact enhancer to both. Unfortunately, I can't reveal more yet, my Whoop friends, because I may be developing a product for you. For now, I can only say this much. The flight tests, or more precisely the static thrust, were definitely influenced by the contact enhancer. I can't say how much yet, but it's more than some people think. I personally already know. I tested it extensively with multiple tests. A video about this will come within the next half year. Stay tuned, my Whoop friends. I really can't explain it, my Whoop friends. Why my Betafpv 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop delivers almost 20% more thrust with exactly the same motors as the Betafpv 75 Pro analog. It must be due to the ESC hardware. On the software side, the ESCs of both whoops are configured identically. If any of you have an idea, feel free to write it in the comments. Personally, I'm a bit puzzled. And yes, of course, I already reported everything to Betafpv and also asked whether the engineers at Betafpv are aware of this difference and how it can be. Betafpv wrote back to me that the engineers are aware of the difference, that it is intentional, and that how they achieved it is still a secret. That is, of course, a bit frustrating for me, but I understand it. In return, Betafpv always sends me the latest products. I can live with that. A little mystery has to remain. Otherwise, the excitement is lost. Just like with my contact enhancer project and a few other projects. Stay tuned, my Whoop friends. Punchout Performance. The punch-out performance of my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop is surprisingly good. I really didn't expect that. But after my thrust test, I now know why that is. The power-to-weight ratio of the 75 Pro HD Whoop is better than that of the analog version. For punch-outs, that is the only thing that matters. The punch-outs are absolutely acceptable for a one-cell HD Whoop. I would even say very good. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Washout behavior. I had no washouts during flights with my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop. Of course, it is possible with any Whoop to provoke washouts by using too little camera angle and incorrect flying. But this Whoop definitely does not have a washout problem. From my point of view, there is no tendency toward washouts, and that despite props in configuration. That surprised me. The Whoop flies really very smoothly. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Flight times. The flight times of my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop in combination with the one-cell Lava 2 680 mAh Lipos and the modifications I presented in the Modifications and Weight chapter are very good. The flight time personally surprised me positively. The hover flight time is around 7 minutes and 45 seconds, with landing at 3.4 volts. I also do not recommend draining the LiPo that deeply every time like I did in the video. In this test, the LiPo was really completely empty after the flight. The recovery voltage of 3.64 volts after 10 minutes was a bit too low. Ideally, it would be 3.7 volts after 15 minutes. But 3.6 volts is also within the acceptable range for us Whoop race pilots. Our LiPos usually don't even make it to their normal end of life anyway, because they get externally damaged in crashes before that. Ideally, for the longest possible lifespan and many cycles, a recovery voltage of 3.7 to 3.8 volts, 15 minutes after the flight would definitely be best. Everyone has to decide for themselves where they set their priorities. By the way, the VTX transmit power has no major influence on hover flight time, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. I did the hover flight time test flights with 25 milliwatt transmit power. Also, during the comparison flights with the analog 75 Pro Whoop, as well as the comparison flight with the Caddx Protos. In the next chapters, you can also see the flight time during normal flights, which in my experience can vary between about 3 minutes during full send flying, around 5 minutes with a moderate flying style, and up to 7 minutes and 30 seconds when cruising calmly. It's like with a car. If you give a lot of throttle, you consume a lot of energy, and with less throttle, less. With tiny whoops, the range is quite large, roughly like a high-performance V8 engine that consumes 12 liters per 100 kilometers when driven economically, but can easily consume 80 liters per 100 kilometers on the racetrack. It's roughly similar with tiny whoops. Our tiny whoops are also high-performance machines. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. few words about the sponsors of this video. Betafpv, Stabilant 22 Contact Enhancer, Deox IT Contact Enhancer, and NPS Encore Contact Enhancer are the sponsors of this video. This video would not be possible without these sponsors, but this video would also not be possible without your support. Thank you very much for your support on Ko-Fi.com and through the affiliate links in the video description, as well as for your likes and comments that motivate me to keep going. Thank you, my whoop friends. Playground flight. In this chapter, you see a flight with my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent whoop at a playground. That would be my personal main use case for this tiny whoop. Flying in a tight area and less than 30 meters away from the pilot position so that video quality and latency remain in a good range, and with soft ground so that not much happens in the event of a crash. The performance of this whoop for this flying style is flawless. This flying style is ideal for this whoop. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Indoor race flight with the Caddx Ascent video system. In this chapter, you see a flight with my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop on a spacious indoor racetrack with large gates. As you can see, it is definitely possible to fly this whoop on such a racetrack. How much sense that makes is something everyone has to decide for themselves. But it is possible, and even though there will certainly be no record lap times, it is still somehow fun to fly like this with the Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop. I definitely got into the flow after a few flights, and that is the only thing that matters to me. However, you should not crash too much with this whoop in combination with the Long Lipos 2 one-cell 680 mAh Lipos, because due to their length, they can be damaged quickly when hitting hard ground. But with smaller, shorter Lipos, some relaxed and smooth indoor racing can definitely be considered with this whoop. Race flight with DJI O4 video system. In this chapter, you see me flying a Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro O4 with the DJI O4 system, using the modified whoop of a whoop friend, which is lighter than the stock whoop and flies with a GNB one-cell 380 mAh 90C Lipo. As you can see, the image quality is fantastic and the latency was also okay. If you are already well practiced and can fly the racetrack from memory, the latency does not bother you much. Analog will always be faster. That is clear. But the image quality from DJI is already very impressive. I will make a few more videos for you with this whoop, my whoop friends. Many thanks to my whoop friend who lent me this whoop. Beginner freestyle flight. In this chapter, you see a flight with my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent Whoop in a kind of beginner freestyle flight on a slightly windy day with an outside temperature of around 10 degrees Celsius. The performance of this whoop for this flying style is flawless. Flying in a predefined area no more than 100 meters away from the pilot's position so that video quality and latency remain in an acceptable range and the signal never drops out, allowing you to concentrate on practicing flight maneuvers. This is ideal for this whoop. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. fast flight around trees and orbits. In this chapter, you see a flight with my Betafpv Meteor 75 Pro HD Ascent, flying fast around a few trees on a slightly windy day with an outside temperature of around 8 degrees Celsius. Flying in a tight area and less than 30 meters away from the pilot's position, so that video quality and latency remain in a good range, and with soft ground so that not much happens in the event of a crash. The performance of this whoop for this flying style is flawless. This flying style is ideal for this whoop. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Problem with long lipos. The problem with long lipos is their durability in crashes. Flight time and performance are great with the large long lipos, especially the Betafpv Lava 2 680mah lipos. But it is important to know that these long lipos are very sensitive to crashes. Especially the front end of the lipo can get significantly dented in a crash, as you can see. And in this case, it was not even with the heavier 75 Pro HD whoop, but with the lighter Air 75 whoop. And it happened on the very first flight. That was very frustrating. Sometimes you can smooth the lipos back out and bend them straight again, but that is definitely not ideal. A lipo condom helps a bit, but even with that, these long lipos can bend significantly. Therefore, my conclusion is that these long lipos are only suitable for pilots who fly smoothly and do not crash often, or who fly over soft ground such as grass or rubber flooring on a playground. For full send flying over hard surfaces like concrete, it makes no sense from my point of view. In the end, of course, everyone has to decide this for themselves. But for me and my flying style, it makes no sense. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Pro tip for long-lasting lipos. If you're flying over concrete and want to protect your lipos, use a lipo condom. You can make one from heat shrink, 3D print one, or cut one from a 2mm foam sheet. It doesn't matter how you do it. What's important is that the front of your lipo is protected in case of impact on concrete. Flight with one LiIon cell taken from a 2-cell LiIon flight battery of the Caddx Protos. Because my Caddx Protos no longer flies, but I still had the 2-cell LiIon batteries from the Caddx Protos, I got the idea that I could take one of these batteries apart to build a 1-cell LiIon battery from it. At this point, a clear warning, please do not try this yourselves, my whoop friends. It was very difficult, it is very dangerous, and it is not worth it. Please do not try this. I was hoping to get more flight time from this idea with the 840mAh LiIon battery, but the flight time was actually shorter than with the Betafpv Lava 2 680mAh LiPo. And the flight performance with the LiIon battery was very poor, especially at low outside temperatures below 10 degrees. It really isn't worth it, friends. In addition, The LiIon battery does not fit into the battery holder of the whoop frame. But it was an interesting experiment, and that is the only way you learn and move forward. I'm glad I tried it once. Now I know for sure that it is not for me. And I now also know that the HD flight controller from Betafpv has a good BEC that keeps the voltage constant even when the battery voltage drops down to 2.6 volts. That is also good to know. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. Info for Caddx Protos users. If you own a Caddx Protos, there are two pieces of news for you. First, you can now flash the Caddx Protos with Betaflight to get a better acro mode. This is now official, and according to Caddx, they have provided a tool for this. However, after flashing to Betaflight, there is no way back, and you will lose the position hold flight mode. That is important to know. I have not tried this myself yet, and therefore do not offer any support for it. This is information from Caddx and is the responsibility of Caddx. You make any changes from the original state at your own risk and responsibility. You can find the link in the video description. The second piece of news is a software update for the Ascent goggles and the Ascent video transmitter. You also perform this update at your own risk and without my support. The software update is supposed to improve latency and range. Personally, I will not do the update. Based on what I have seen on the internet, it does not seem to be the final update yet. And since I am currently satisfied with my system for my use case, I will leave my Ascent as it is. Caddx recommends doing the update. You can find the link in the video description. I would appreciate feedback from those who do perform the update. If you have more questions about the Caddx Protos and want to stay up to date with the latest information, I recommend joining the Caddx Protos Facebook group. You can find the link in the video description. There will be some interesting news from Caddx in the near future. Stay tuned. Caddx Ascent video system range check. The range of the Caddx Ascent video system, as I have mentioned many times, is not particularly large. The Ascent system seems to be optimized for low manufacturing cost and a low selling price, not for performance, at least not at the moment. For me, the range was sufficient for what I do. If you want to know in detail how large the range is and how the Caddx Ascent video system behaves, then watch my separate video on this YouTube channel about the Caddx Ascent range. There isn't much more to say. If you still have a question about this topic, feel free to ask it in the comments of this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you were able to take something valuable from it, please consider supporting me on Ko-Fi.com or by purchasing your products through my affiliate links, which you can find in the video description of this video, along with other important information. If you really liked the video, Please share it with your friends so it can spread further and bring joy to other pilots as well. I wish you all a good flight into the new year. Let's hope there will be many positive turns in the new year. Hope dies last. Happy flying, my whoop friends.
Some additional information can be found in the video description. Please watch my many other tutorials on this YouTube channel if you want to know more about how to modify a tiny whoop or how to learn FPV flying and racing.